Hey guys, it's Adam from LUCIDPIXUL, and I wanted to do a quick follow-up on my M2 iPad Pro, the 2022 edition first impressions video I posted just a couple of days ago, which you can check out right here, where I shared my thoughts and feelings about a new feature in particular called Apple Pencil Hover. Which I, for one, and I think I'm probably the only one on the platform so far on YouTube who's actually excited about this feature, because the majority of tech YouTubers who are more average consumer tech YouTubers, understandably, have reacted in a very underwhelmed way to this new announcement. They basically say it's really not worth the upgrade as far as that's concerned. But I beg to differ on this because of my unique perspective. So I wanted to answer a few questions and share some thoughts moving forward, albeit I haven't tested it yet. This is all speculation at this point, but I think it's safe to get excited about this because this is a software or hardware feature that has been released, and we'll get to that in a sec. So the first question, I'll start with questions first, is from Doa Flamingo, who writes, remember guys, hover feature will be useful if you decide to use the iPad as a pen tablet. Very good point, which was not possible before. Kind of eliminates the need for a pen tablet if you have a new iPad now, if cost is not a barrier. Now, first, cost. A lot of people are comparing the cost of the new iPad Pro to the cost of a MacBook Air, which is an understandable comparison, absolutely, if you're not a professional digital artist. You're not taking full advantage of this technology. You have to realize that pen display technology is very expensive, and Apple doesn't do it the cheap way. They're not a budget option pen display. They're up there with the Cintiq pen displays as far as that goes. And a Cintiq costs 3 to 4 times the cost of an iPad Pro. It also relies on an external computer. It also is humongous and sits on your desk and is not portable. It also makes your fans kick off in high gear if you're working on the 4K version. It makes a lot of noise in your studio. This flimsy, light little display, which sits on your lap, barely ever warms up unless you're really pushing it, but barely at all. Zero fan noise, and it can be a very unassuming little piece of technology. And minus the fact that this doesn't actually implement, in most cases, full-on desktop apps like the Mac, it has very powerful, very capable apps. But one of its shortcomings has been, well, the lack of Apple Pencil Hover. And this is, I think, one of the barriers to entry for a lot of professionals like myself that, you know, when you rely on something to work on every single day, and if you're going to invest your money into something like this, a feature like that is a very big deal. And it makes a very significant difference. One of which I've been testing all week because I've been kind of refamiliarizing myself with the feel and testing out different apps on my iPad, because I've got pretty much all of them, and dealing with the frustration of not having Apple Pencil Hover. So this is a pen display, and that's not something to be taken for granted. This is very, very advanced technology that's done extremely well, and you're paying for that kind of stuff. So if you're not an artist, if you don't paint digitally, then I really honestly don't see why you'd be buying an iPad in the first place. I would say buy a MacBook instead, right? So next one, Dalibor Garza writes, Samsung has had this feature for a long time. And what Dalibor is saying is also something that a lot of people have been saying. A lot of tech YouTubers said Samsung released this back in 2012, I think, or something like that. I'm glad the iPad's getting it too. It's a very important feature, to be honest. Yes, it's a very important feature. And I'm sure that anybody who's worked on a Samsung for this long probably works on a Samsung because they really, if they draw on a Samsung at least, because they appreciate that feature. So yeah, absolutely. Samsung have definitely been to the game much earlier. That said, this also makes me excited because Apple tend to be late to the game. They might be the tortoise in the hare, but they very often tend to really dominate a market with their implementation of things. And hopefully this translates into the M2 iPad Pro with their Apple Pencil Hover. They might do an absolutely spectacular job. It might work beautifully, or maybe not. So, you know, you might want to subscribe for that so you can find out my opinions on that, probably coming sometime next week. I've got the Magic Keyboard. I got that in the mail yesterday, but I'm going to be getting my M2 iPad Pro sometime this week. So there you go. Lars writes, Borodante is a low-key art genius. And he's referring to my comment about Borodante, also his YouTube channel known as BoroCG, he solved, to the best of his ability, to the best of the iPad Pro's ability to actually preview your brush cursor while painting, because he is a very professional digital painter who wanted to develop his own iPad app that solves this issue. And he, in my opinion, had the greatest implementation, where you had the entire side of the iPad being a hit zone for your thumb, where all you had to do was press down and slide your finger up and down or side to side for brush size or opacity. And because there's a high contrast white circle on a black surface, made it easy enough to be able to gauge in your peripheral vision, so you could keep your eyes on your image, which is the whole point of Apple Pencil Hover. It's not having to pull your eyes away from your image. And furthermore, being able to see your brush cursor when your pen is more than 2 millimeters away from the screen, which is what the current iPads can only do, right? You only see that brush cursor once it's actually making physical contact, in which case you're already leaving a mark and it's too late. So it becomes extremely finicky, albeit he was working with the limitation of the iPad. So yeah, I do partially agree with you, but I don't entirely agree with you, Lars. There's nothing low-key about Borodante. Next question, or next comment. Mackie Pen writes, it's a big jump, but it's a shame it's M2 exclusive. Yes, that is kind of sad, especially if you just forked over a bunch of dough for the M1. So as an owner of the M1 iPad, I feel slightly upset. Haha. There's nothing funny about that, it is sad. With that said, now the hover cursor will be mandatory and given on all the iterations of the pen, albeit it's not a pen implementation, it's actually in the display. That's why it's going to continue to use the same Apple Pencil 2nd Gen. So I'm looking forward to what Apple does in the case they choose to focus on artists, and that's the key thing here. Okay, I wanted to take a moment to talk about where I'm feeling more and more every day, and I'm getting excited. Where I feel Apple is placing themselves in the market strategically. I really feel that they're starting to speak more and more every day towards digital artists. And Apple have always been the artist-friendly computer, the artist-friendly brand as far as that goes. And the last few pieces of tech that they've released had a lot of average consumer tech YouTubers scratching their heads. One good example is the Apple Studio displays, which I have two of right behind me over here. One of the best purchases I ever made, professionally speaking, and one which I had a chance to have a chat with a couple of my friends at the Cult of Mac podcast, which you can check out on YouTube and Apple Podcasts. I'm going to check out their podcast again just to see if they have any takes on the M2 iPad Pro. A lot of people were scratching their heads because they said it's just an overpriced display, and it doesn't hold up to the majesty that is the Pro Display XDR. It's also 1/3 the price. And my point was, I don't think that people are getting the point. The Apple Studio display is not an expensive display. It's effectively an iMac that's split in half into the Mac Studio and the Apple Studio display, giving professionals perfectly calibrated screens which are extremely high quality, with the speaker and the webcam integrated directly into it, and a separate computer allowing you to be able to expand into multiple displays. Any self-respecting professional works on more than one display. I mean, it's not mean you can't work on one, but if you need the real estate of your screen for video or photo editing and another display, if you look at Tech Gear Talk, I think he has like 5 displays. He's a little bit out of his mind, but it's a pretty dope looking setup. But yeah, having the ability to expand into multiple displays is mandatory, and that wasn't a very graceful implementation with an iMac, because you'd have the iMac plus another display of your choice on the side, so these colors wouldn't match. So now they've solved that problem. So I have zero regrets about my Apple Studio displays. Now when it comes to the M2 MacBook Pro with Apple Pencil Hover, I'm extremely excited about this, because this is really an update catering directly to digital artists, where most of the audience out there are scratching their heads on why they would even, what's the big deal, I guess, if you're a digital painter. And if you look at most of the reviews, if you check out all these reviews, nobody's particularly excited about it, but I am. And it made me think about when the movie Turning Red came out. My initial reaction was, what is this garbage? Pixar, you have fallen so far from grace. And both my daughters looked at me and they said, what the hell are you talking about? That's one of the best films they ever produced. And I went, no, it's not. It's cringy. It's stupid. The humor is ridiculous. And they said, that's the point. And it made me realize something. I stopped for a moment and I went, Pixar didn't make it for a 46-year-old man. They didn't make that movie for a middle-aged old coot like myself. They made it for young women. They chose their demographic specifically. And I went, I'm going to sit down and shut up now. Good on you, right? And I think this is exactly the same thing that's happening with Apple Pencil Hover. What they're doing is they're really perfecting their drawing technology on their Apple displays. Why? Well, I want this to be on the record, so when and if this happens, people are going to say, Adam predicted this back in 2022, which I actually predicted back a little while back too. At least it was a wishful thinking thing. I think they're placing themselves for an upcoming pen display, a Wacom Cintiq competitor. And if you're a digital painter and if you're an Apple shill, like I have become quite dedicatedly so in the last couple of years, then that's something to be extremely excited about. But I would, with the current Bluetooth technology, with the current lack of Apple Pencil Hover, and I would say, Apple, if you're listening, please make rubber tips for the Apple Pencil. That would be a very cheap upgrade. That would make a very big difference for artists. Then we have a lot to be excited about. Oh, we have a lot to be excited about. And just think about the Mac Studio being split up from the iMac, and then you can, instead of getting an Apple Studio display, the next iteration of an Apple Studio display being a pen display. Is your mouth watering yet? Oh, mine is. I think that this is where they're going with this, but they had to make sure that whatever technology they were working with is acceptable to a professional standard. And this might be the case. Stay tuned. We'll find out. So yeah, hopefully I've answered a few questions. If you have any more, I'll do another follow-up. I'm expecting my iPad Pro, my M2 iPad Pro sometime this week. I'm going to be doing a comparison to the 4th gen iPad Pro that I have over here, just to show you the differences between the two. And if you have any questions in the interim, if you have any curiosities, or if you have any information to share, if you know for sure, for certain, if this is a hardware or a software implementation, let me know down below, and you can make a mention to your resources. Of course, you can't link to that resource, but just let us know below and I'll make sure to pin your comment. And again, thank you for everybody who's chimed in. I'm, for one, extremely excited where Apple's going moving forward, and stay tuned. Happy painting.